Second episode begins with Carol watching a man and woman play in the lake. Not long after that, she is joined by a frantic Daryl Dixon, who wants to know where she's been. She shows him the couple and tells him they are perfect. Daryl immediately notices that they have a lot of stuff and won't put up much of a fight. Carol tries to talk him out of approaching them, but he says he'll only take a little. Before he can approach them, they are scared away by three other men with guns. Daryl and Carol watch the three men find the young couple and force them out of hiding. The young man tries pulling out a knife, but one of the men with the guns disarms him and hits him in the face. They ask him where he's from. He tells them Santiago. Just as it looks like the men with the guns are about to shoot the young couple, Daryl shoots one of the men with his crossbow. It doesn't take him long to take out the other two and save the young couple. Seconds later, a fourth man comes out of the brush and sees what has happened. Daryl tries to grab one of the fallen men's guns and shoot him, but he is too far away. Daryl chases him all the way back to his vehicle, where he escapes. The young woman introduces herself as Justina and thanks Daryl for saving her. He tells her that Carol is hurt and asks if there is a doctor nearby. Roberto says they don't come from the area. Then he and Justina spend a few minutes arguing in Spanish about whether or not they should help Carol. Justina eventually tells them that her grandmother is a healer. Daryl asks if they can take them to her. Roberto says it's not possible. Daryl takes them at gunpoint and makes them take him to the village. When they arrive at the village, they meet Paz. Justina tells her about Daryl saving them and Carol needing help. She gets Gustavo to open the gate and let them in. Not long after this, they find themselves being held at gunpoint. Daryl pulls his gun as Justina tries to explain what happened at the lake to her uncle Fed. Fed welcomes them to Solas Delmare. Justina's grandmother gives Carol medicine while Fed chews Roberto out for taking his niece and sneaking off in the night. Daryl interrupts them to ask if he has a quiet place where Carol can lie down. Fed introduces himself as the mayor and says they don't allow outsiders. This is when Justina steps in and says they can't turn them away. Robert's father, Antonio, offers to let Carol and Daryl stay with him and his family. Fed tells them they can have 2 days. Daryl asks Roberto if he has some tools that he can borrow to fix the boat. Roberto says maybe he can help him fix the boat, and they take him and Justina with them. Daryl asks him what's so bad about the place. Roberto tells him they won't let him and Justina be together. Carol wakes the next morning to a feast and finds Daryl getting ready to head out and patch up the boat. Seconds later, Paz comes riding up on her horse and tells Antonio that someone is there. Elsewhere, men ride into the town on horses and in cars. Antonio tells Carol that those people are the last convoy from Elcasar. Guillermo Torres is set to be the next king. When Guillermo presents gifts to Fed, an outraged man from the village asks where his daughter is and throws a bottle at Guillermo's men. He is apprehended and taken away. Seconds later, a woman in a veil steps out of one of the cars, and some speculate that she is the next queen. Guillermo announces to the citizens that tomorrow they will eat, drink, and hold the ofrenda. Antonio explains that a girl from the village will be chosen tomorrow and taken so that she can be married off to the Elcasar. Roberto tells Daryl this is what they were running from. The man who asked about his daughter is strung up in the middle of town for all to see. Daryl returns from working on the boat to find Carol sitting outside, listening to Roberto and Antonio argue. Daryl says it's best if they stay out of that. Carol says they owe it to them to help. Daryl says they should focus on getting back home. The queen introduces herself to the girls and tells them that they all look like beautiful brides. At the same time, Paz receives a message from the queen. Paz tips her hat at her after reading it. Later that day, the pigs race to determine which lady will be chosen. It turns out to be Alba. After Alba is chosen, the man that Daryl chased away earlier arrives in town. Daryl goes to speak with Paz. It is during this conversation that he learns that Paz helped Roberto and Justina escape. Seconds later, she excuses herself and goes to speak with the queen in secret. It turns out that the two knew each other and were possibly involved. Fed tells Daryl that he and Carol should join him at their table for dinner. Daryl sees Paz meeting with the queen. During dinner, Daryl and Carol talk about coming from America. Fed tells them that he was worried when they first came into town, but now that he's got to know them and learned more about them, he welcomes their insight. Carol tells him that some of their traditions are surprising, and she's learned that the old ways are not always the best ways. Alba's mother is asked to say a few words about her daughter being chosen. She is too broken up, too. So Justina steps in and wishes her the best and hopes that God looks after her journey. This is when Carol chimes in and asks why they surrender their daughters for a few supplies. The queen says that El Alcasar is Spain's hope for the future, and Ofrenda gives the girls the opportunity to thrive and be safe. The queen says, "Just look at her. She is the living proof." Carol asks what about the parents and how their hearts must break after losing their daughter. Fed says that the problem is that Solas was under constant siege until they joined the alliance. This is about the time that Daryl notices the man from earlier. He excuses himself from the table and takes a knife with him on his way out. Justina's grandmother tells Carol that they found a way of life that works for them, and then tells her to come back when she finds something better. They conclude the evening with a dance. The men look for Daryl while the town dances. Fed tells Carol they've made sacrifices, but they couldn't have survived without the alliance. She tells him that his mother has a point. Daryl ends up finding a machete and getting the jump on the men looking for him and killing them. At the same time, Fed tells Carol more about their traditions and why they chose the way of life they did.